So we're going to call to order the Finance and Audit Committee agenda, and I am going to read the statement of announcement. The meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of July 10th, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting was distributed July 9th, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disability and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. So I'd like to get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So move.
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. So we'll pass as written. The next item is the review of the minutes of June 5th, 2020 Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to get a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, minutes are approved as presented. So the first item on the agenda is the waiver slot validation project. And Kevin, I know, is going to lead this discussion or be available for this discussion. Okay. Well, I was just going to say that
She has to speak too.
I just requested that we take a look at the report dated June 17th, 2020 that went out regarding DDSN funded waiver slots. My hope was, of course, I read the report, and I read these reports when they come over for all the different reasons. I know. Now, whether I understand all the reports is, somewhat questionable, at least at first, but I know, particularly waiver slots are high interest to the public and often referred to. And when people think of DDSN, the first thing they talk about usually is the waivers and how they're on a waiting list, and that, there's how many slots are there and why is it so long. And so I just thought we take this opportunity in this meeting, since we haven't really since I've been a commissioner, haven't really had this report yet, or I hadn't seen it. And so I just thought it would be good to just top line what you had written in terms of importance and, any the most critical issues that I guess your department division thinks about when we think about the waiver slots and that whole process. So that's what I was hoping to do today.
So just to give a little bit of background, this is one that, and Pat can jump in here as well, management asked us to look at because they felt like there possibly had been an overstatement of waiver slots to the commission.
Okay.
And so then the program folks they asked the program folks to go back and come up with a number that they thought were possibly over allocated. And then Pat asked internal audit to validate it.
Okay.
And we did come up with a different number.
Okay.
That's shown on the report. So I think initially.
And who did the first analysis, I guess? You would say, when you say like the
Management Policy Division.
Policy Division.
Okay, Policy Division. Okay. All right. And then your team
Validated, went in to validate the number.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's on, it's on page 3 is the simplest analysis of it.
Okay.
So if you look at that chart on page 3, policy they thought that there was 506 slots
Okay.
overstatement.
Okay.
And you
Is that
can
at the
see-
top of the page or is that in the chart?
It's in the chart, that bottom number where it says
I got it.
variance.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? And so the numbers above there, we started with FY13 base because we came out of 08 and we didn't have any money for forever, right? So we felt like that was, as did policy, they did the same thing. So we said, okay, that's our base number. And then what were the new slots, newly funded slots, 14, 15, 16, 17, broken out by IDRD and community supports. We lumped those together, and then HASKI.
Okay,
And you can see the step down there.
yeah,
And so when we did the, and again, their number was 506. When we went back and we looked at the spending plan and the slots, and we came up with 51. There was an allocation of 51 slots.
Mm.
And what we found was the discrepancy. There was,
residential bed expansion?
yeah, it was mainly in the residential. That was by far the bulk. There were a few duplicative numbers where folks were in CS and moving to ID, but the bulk of it was in the residential expansion, which was not included in their numbers, and we included in our numbers.
Okay, okay. So, so the 51, so the 51 is the number of, was the difference, you said, right, the variance, the difference between what they came up with.
Right.
Let's see.
So what we're saying is total slots of 12,989.
Okay,
And the number presented to the commission a few months ago was 13,040, as shown in that chart.
okay,
So the overstatement there is 51 slots as opposed to
506,
506,
okay.
which is a good thing.
Good news.
Right, that's a good
Right,
news.
yeah, it is good news, right. So,
What exactly does that mean to the agency? The fact that we've overstated by 51, does that mean we were overpaid for those slots or underpaid or what?
The 51, in my opinion, was, given the way we account for things and maybe some of the looseness of the past, the fact that we're only off 51 is immaterial, and I recommend no changes to our records, because that would mean we'd be reducing slots to the consumers, which we don't want to do.
right,
But when we saw the initial variance of 500, that's an $8 million liability that basically we promised, of which we did not get legislatively funded. That was the original thesis of it all. And the thesis is driven by the fact that we have a lot of waiver slots that we still can't put on the street because our system's a little slow.
right,
And we did find one error in the HASKI slot. So when we looked at it, when we found that initial 506 number, that put us in a position of, well, if it was not legislatively funded and we made a math error, basically the agency, we still may not have done anything about it, because once you promise, it's hard to unpromise. But at least we knew it was a mistake. And so when he validated the mistake, the mistake was our first review was off. And the second review came in and said, no, there's not much difference there. And therefore, because there's no difference, there's no way we can make a 51 slot adjustment, because the way we kept records in the past has a level of looseness to it. It could be 51, it could be 48, it could be 12, but it was materially the same. And therefore, the conclusion was, we're not going to change anything as far as what we've represented to the consumers. We still owe approximately 1,000 waiver slots.
Right. And that 51, to be quite honest, there is some potential that might be a little bit high, because one year the commission approved, the approval was, well, we're going to try to fund 25 to 50 new slots based on availability. So when we were doing our analysis, we went with 50. We went with the higher number.
yeah,
So, if you took 25 out of there, it could really be 26 slots that were potentially over allocated, which in this system is really minimal,
right, okay,
And when Kevin did his audit, he went back to policy and they agreed that Kevin's audit is correct.
okay.
And so we're back to where we began, where we still owe 1,000 slots. And we just got to get them out there quicker.
All
And we
right,
can't get paid back until we get somebody in the slot. Is that what you're saying?
No, they're really liabilities. Once we put the slot into service, then we have to start paying the services. So the inference is, we were given money by the legislation and we just haven't used it yet, because we haven't been, there's such a churn in the system, we can't get it out quick enough. And that's one of the major projects that policy is working on now is how do we speed up the allocations? And there's a lot of reasons why it's not that way, and that's a whole nother meeting, and they're working on it, and I think we've got some traction on it, but that's the bigger issue.
Right.
It's not that the slots haven't been allocated, they've been allocated, they're just not enrolled.
Right.
So it's taking people so long to get through the enrollment process that, and there's a few solutions to that problem, including when folks get through our eligibility process, we really have to think about funding case management at that point, so we don't lose touch with these folks. So when the slot is given to them, we know where they are, we know who they are, where they are, and we also have an idea as to what they need. So again, once we verify one thing, it kind of sheds a light on a few other things that need to be fixed.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that
Yep.
explanation.
I was going to say,
Appreciate it.
yep, absolutely. Anybody have any other questions? Okay.
All right. Well, Stephanie, were you going to say something? No? Okay. Maybe it's background noise.
No, I'm good,
So-
thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next item, COVID-19 financial resources for providers. And I think Chris might lead that discussion.
Yeah, I just know that, provider network and our agency are in very trying times with all these changes to our service delivery system, with day program closures and all kinds of other things going on. So the commission obviously has been involved in our last year adjustment to the providers for the 3.6 million, because, can y'all hear me all right? I'm kind of far away from the phone. Can you hear me all right?
I'm fine.
You just getting a lot of background noise because of shuffling or something like that, but anyway.
So, we recouped $3.6 million last year towards the end of the year for the day program closures. And of course, those closures continue. A lot of folks are reopening slowly, some faster than others, some not at all. And Mary and other folks can speak to that particular aspect if y'all want to ask questions about the day programs themselves, but that's not what I was presenting. I just wanted to let y'all know that, there's a whole host of different financial resources that are out there that are available to businesses and other entities struggling with this crisis. And I just wanted to list a few that are out there that we know folks are taking advantage of, and then kind of speak to some potential snags or problems that we see that we're going to have to address. Just again, this is information. There's not going to be ask for a motion or approval of anything. It's just to give you guys some background information. Like I said, our day programs, we continue to run about the same amount of losses as we were last year on a weekly basis. We don't know when those numbers are going to tick back up. And when we did the original contracts, we put all the original BAM-Bs and Is on the street, as Pat says. So all that funding that we didn't adjust any of the contracts opening this fiscal year due to these closures. And so, we're fully funding everything. And so we're going to have some decisions to make this quarter. We'll have to bring back some recommendations to the commission and the committee. Again, that's not really what I'm speaking to today, but we are going to have to do something. And part of the issue is these resources that folks have available, and how do we go about navigating all of this? So I'm just going to first list them, and then we can kind of dig into those in detail if you'd like. First of all, we have had a couple Appendix Ks that we're working on, which generate additional revenues and payment sources. This latest one might have retainer payments in it, right, Mary?
It will have retainer payments.
So, we have some potential assistance coming in that area. There's a $15 billion pot of provider relief funds that we've told our providers that they should apply for, and we've given a guidance on that in writing, in email. Pat's has a hotline to his office to assist providers as they have questions and problems with applying. Each provider could get up to 2%, maybe even more, of their Medicaid billed revenues. So it's a nice amount, it's not huge. I mean, if someone has a $10 million budget, for example, it's only a couple $100,000, but every little bit counts. So those funds are out there, and that application is due July 20th, and Pat's working through any issues that providers have, and that's one of the things we just emailed Genetics Center about, make sure that they're aware of those as well. PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, I do know a lot of our providers got those funds, and they're huge. Everyone I've heard of is, except for one, is over $1 million. So that poses a set of risks to our system that I'll get into here in a minute. But a lot of we sent in a FOIA request to get a list of all the providers that got PPP. Basically, SBA got bombarded with FOIA requests, and they just basically gave up and said, we'll just publish the whole list so everybody can see it. I tried to go to their website. I don't know if it was down because of all the folks trying to get in it or what, but I was unable to. It's out there, but I was unable to access it yesterday or the day before when I tried to get in it. But I do know we've probably got at least $15 million worth of PPP in our system that providers have received. There's an EIDL, or Economic Impact Disaster Loan Advance, which is $10,000, basically a free money that pretty much anybody can get if they applied for it. And then there's an Economic Impact Development Loan, which is has to be repaid, which folks are also eligible for. So the purpose of me mentioning this is two-pronged. One is so the commission, as they hear that providers, are worried about their financials and aren't able to bill and things of that nature. I want you to kind of have a good understanding of all the different resources that are out there that we're trying to provide and educate, and through Appendix K, develop specified targeted solutions. So that's one intent. The second is this is going to wreak havoc on us as we try to report our costs for this year. It is very important that providers not double dip or not count expenses more than once. To the extent that we have kept them whole and they are not losing money during this, it will be really hard for anyone to argue that they are using any other money other than ours. So in other words, if my agency from April to June made $100,000 and the only money they get is from us, then how are you going to argue that you are using any other funds?
There's losses.
So until you have losses, you really don't have a situation where you can claim these, because if for example, they say, oh, well, we're not using DDSN's money, we're using our PPP. Now that puts us in a position where we might have to recoup funds from the provider ourselves because we've given them money that they haven't spent with our funds. And so it's a real problem. And the real issue I'm having is I have a hard time giving guidance right now. There's really no resources for me as the CFO to come up with rules and examples and things to give our providers. It's kind of trying to develop this stuff on the fly, but they're really needing some guidance, and I hope to be able to do so soon. But really what I'm needing is more information from providers so I know what they have. So let's say they've got all 5 of these things.
All the loans.
Yeah, I mean, if they've tapped all this,
Right.
which they could, all these, you don't have to attest that I didn't get this to get that. Now, the provider relief funds that I mentioned, yes, you have to attest that you didn't get some of these other monies, but none of these monies that I mentioned. It more relates to the other pots of CARES Act funds that were out there. So as we look at our cost reports for this year, we've got some issues we need to talk about, and then when we come to y'all with our solution, this July to September period right now, we have given them 100% of their funding. So we're going to have to look at another recoupment process. Whether y'all agree to take funds back or not, that's a decision y'all will have to make, but it's going to be very similar to a calculation that we had to do at the tail end of prior fiscal year. And what complicates it is all these other monies that might be out there. And so that's really my goal with having this on the agenda. And so I will let y'all, do y'all have any comments, Pat or Mary, about anything I said? If not, then if y'all have questions, I'll be glad to try and field those. But again, this was just more of an informational topic.
Well, I want to say that I absolutely believe that if somebody gets PPP money or some other money, that we cannot allow them and should not allow them to double dip and therefore should recoup the money. Absolutely 100%. That's what worried me about about people getting PPP money, providers getting PPP money to begin with, was that we had already given them all this money up front, like we talked about, in as of the first of the year for this quarter, and then they're going to be double dipping if we don't take money back. So absolutely 100%, we need to make a motion that we will recoup whatever money they get from these sources, and they have to tell us what sources they get money from. And if we find out later, we'll recoup it later, and should be a penalty if they lie and don't tell us the truth about how much money they got.
Do y'all support that? Let me see a problem with.
It's too early. In
I think it's premature to do that today, but I think when we bring our recommendation back to you all, these are some of the things that I think are open to discussion that we need to be able to answer.
Well, I appreciate Chris bringing it, because it was actually on my notes to bring up PPP today, so I'm glad that was brought up.
It's just, and then you also we want to, I mean, there's not a lot of guidance still out there, so we don't know what's coming down the pike later on to say, this is how we're going to audit this, or we're not going to audit this. We have no idea what the federal government's planning on doing either. I just think it's too soon to make that kind of statement at this point. We just know you can't claim expense more than one time.
Right.
You can't put it in every bucket that you have money coming from. So we just have to make sure that that's done properly.
And we're in a one-way settlement right now, so if we lose our ability to claim expenses because they're being claimed elsewhere, we're going to have potentially a significant payback. So we're going to have to really look at this closely.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So the next item on the agenda is capital needs recap.
Right. So basically, I'm just, fairly new in my job still, even though it's been a year at this point. Things are starting to click with a lot of the internal stuff now, because I've been very provider centric kind of since I got here. But, now we're really starting to look a lot more internal and to our own agency. And that's part of my job, not just dealing with providers. And so what I'm starting to do is piece together all these different things that we have out there that we need to do from a capital perspective. And I thought it would be healthy to have a conversation with you all, just to let you know kind of the stuff that I'm seeing thus far, and go over just kind of a big picture. So if there's a table, do you have one, Robin?
Yeah, I do.
Looks like this.
Yeah, I did get it. Gotta find it. Here it is.
It came out later. I sent it myself.
Maybe get one.
So
No, thank you.
Kevin, I got you one.
one of the things that kind of dawned on me is I really didn't know our vehicle situation. And so when I gave them all one, we operate 135 vehicles, I think it is here. And when we looked at the two pools we basically have are regional centers and central office. We have a few vehicles here, but the most of ours are at the regional centers. And I sent you the list of the vehicles as well as a chart of how old they are. And you can see out of around 125 vehicles out at regional centers, only 20 are under 5 years old. The vast majority are well over 20 years. And so we've got a real problem here that we've inherited, and we've got to figure out a way to get out of it as well as to maintain it going forward so that our folks are not riding around in unsafe and dilapidated transportation. So part of my chart I've provided is kind of a 4-year plan to replace 100% of our fleet, and then enter into a actual replacement plan on an annual basis so that we are constantly looking at our vehicles and considering replacements, and that we have a very effective rotation strategy so that vehicles are rotated around to get the most use out of them. And so I have scheduled out in this chart at the top line there, the vehicles, $4.8 million. I just estimated $40,000 per vehicle. Some will be more, some will be less. ADA vehicles are almost $60,000. So it'll level out probably around 40 or maybe a little bit less. But again, just trying to get a big picture of what's going on here. Y'all were presented with our CPIP, which is our Capital Permanent Improvement, Comprehensive Permanent Improvement Plan. This fiscal year passed $945,000 worth of our projects, but if you look at the 5-year plan that Andrew presented, and you look down the path, we got 3.8 million next year, 3.8 the year after, 3.8 million after that, and 2.7 the year after that. So that's almost $15 million that's coming at us over the next 5 years. Non-PIP, what that is a bunch of things that are minor. They're not over $100,000 that we have to do, and it's just a ballpark estimate. Things are always coming up. I mean, it's all kinds of things that we easily spend that every year on outside the PIP. The central office, this is just a wild guess, but I don't know if y'all remember or not, but we had a group come in and speak to us. They were a handicapped group, and one of the ladies that presented to us stated that she felt like we had some ADA issues here that we needed to address. And so Andrew's an engineer, and I had him open up an ADA study of this building. Most of the issues he's finding, yeah, they're ADA issues now under current codes, but they're not when the building was built. But of course, you know, we are the Disabilities and Special Needs Agency, and so we might need to bring some, like our bathrooms, for example. They may have met codes then, but they don't meet them now, and they really don't meet our needs, the needs of a disabled person now. So we are just estimating that it would take about $600,000 to bring this facility up to snuff. Most of that's like bathroom issues. Some are like repositioning parking spaces to the back of the facility and addressing our entrance back there. So that's just a wild estimate. And then our infrastructure for our IT, we have supposed to replace our, let me say it this way. The Department of Admin is very, very strict on our computers. Security is massive. So we are under a lot of scrutiny in regards to how we maintain our infrastructure and our computers. And what our IT folks say is that we need to get into a habit of replacing a third of our fleet, if you will, our computers a year. And so that's about $250,000 a year. We are 3 years behind on that because we didn't have money. The people prior to us and me last year, we just didn't have the funds. And so right now we've got to start tackling that. This VMware project is just something that Pat doesn't even know about it yet, or Mary, so we're not actually proposing anything, but it's a big project sitting out there that I think we will end up implementing. And then our business intelligence, Ben Orner's in here. You, Ben? Yeah. He's leading the charge on this. It's a real advancement in the way that we gather data and report things, not only internally but externally with our provider network. So that's in there. And then our wireless routers and all of our switches and everything, we're about to refresh those this year, but we need to do that like every 4 years. So as you can see, we need about $28 million over the next 5 years just for these projects. And so part of the strategy that I want to bring to the table, for those that don't know, most of this is regional, a lot of this is regional centers, facility, as well as vehicles. The vast majority of it is. And what DSN's always done in the past is they've used the care and maintenance that we collect from our ICFs or our regional centers and have fed our CPIP, our capital projects. It's about $4 million a year, right, Pat?
4.5.
And so that money I don't know how many years it's been. This year, we're going to fully be able to utilize that 4 million, but last year we weren't able to fund it at all. And I think maybe a year or two even before that, the whole amount
Right.
couldn't be funded. So we do have an established cash flow, if you will, identified to feed our capital projects. The issue I have is it's only $4 million a year. And part of our options is to work with the state treasurer's office. They have what's called a master lease program. And utilizing their funding through the state treasurer's office. Now they're all vetting it, and we're a state agency and we're eligible to participate. The going rate for these projects right now is about 0.9%, so less than 1%. And so part of our strategy, I think, needs to tap into that funding option. And we are limited to financing those things that are typical collateral type items that if we don't pay our debts back, the person financing it or the bank can take it and sell it and get their money. So you're talking vehicles, generators, retherm equipment, IT stuff. They will not pay for roofs, HVACs, paving, demolishing buildings, none of that. So basically the goal here is to just bring y'all up to speed with kind of the big picture of our capital needs and just get your feedback on whether you agree that the master lease program should be part of our solution. And if you agree that that's something y'all support before we start presenting to the actual commission some applications and some proposals.
If we just relied on the $4 million a year.
We can't catch up.
We can't get out of the loop we're in. Plus, there really isn't any reason not to. The interest rate is so good that you'd be, basically using their money to get the stuff done that you need done, and we're just paying it back. I mean, the idea of incurring this type of debt where it's vetted through the state and we are allowed to use that program, it makes perfect sense to me. I would have grabbed onto it. I used debt as a means to get what I needed to get in my previous position. We financed vehicles. I didn't pay for them with cash. So this is just something we see as an avenue that is allowed by the state. I mean, it's a state program. The staff is just saying that we want to basically see what y'all think. If you're dead set against it, we're not going to work it, and because it's work.
Like when we talked to the state treasurer's office about this, the last one they just did was about $10 million in school buses for the Department of Ed. So a lot of universities are using this, Department of Ed, and other state agencies.
So DDSN's never used it, as far as you know?
I can't say never.
No.
Okay.
I'm not aware of them ever using it.
Kevin's been here longer than we have.
I'm not aware, yeah.
Okay.
I just think that's something we have to think about long and hard before we make, and shouldn't make any decisions or comments about it today, because we are a very political agency in a very hot political situation in the last couple of years, considering we were down to $150,000 in cash only left in our budget just a year ago. And the political implications of us considering borrowing money does not sound good at all. And until we get to a situation where we are in a fee-for-service format to where we know exactly how much everything's going to cost us for the whole agency, I don't know. But I know that this would be a very difficult thing for the legislature to swallow, I believe, if we were to even seriously consider borrowing money.
Well, our alternative is then when we present our budget, we're going to have to find $7 million of cash next year in our budget. I mean, we got to pay, if we don't borrow it, we got to pay for it out of our checking account. So it's not like the projects have to be done. They're not things that can be deferred.
Well, then we may have to cut funding somewhere. Then we may have to cut somebody's budget. I mean, the providers have millions and millions of dollars in reserve, so we may have to cut into some of that. I don't know exactly how we have to do it, and I'm only one member, but I can tell you that is a very politically, I mean, we could literally be in a political hot water for borrowing money in this agency at this time.
I would be more than willing to go talk to the members of our House Ways and Means Committee, subcommittee members, and our Senate Finance Subcommittee members to see if this would be an issue or if they would support it.
Well, I'd like to hear what they had to say, but I'd like to hear, I'd like to be in such a meeting myself.
All righty.
I don't know quite what to say to that one, but okay, gotcha.
All right, well,
Did we lose Mr. Miller?
yeah, maybe.
Sometimes they fall off the screen.
Ed Miller, are you there? Crap. Technology, God love it.
He was here, but I don't think he is now. We might ask Mark.
Hey, this is Stephanie.
There he goes. He just signed back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Okay, good.
I have a comment. This is Ed Miller.
Mhm.
When you just look to see, there's an open end and a closed end lease. If you can get the terms of the closed end lease in place, I think that's something you really want to look at if it's a closed end lease.
So these are what's called financing leases, where it's basically a loan. It's not an operating lease where the equipment reverts to the lessor like
Right.
a copier would.
Okay.
These are basically bank loans called leases.
Okay.
So
It's almost like saying you're defunding the police or you're reimagining police. It's just a different word for the same thing, right?
I don't think, I wouldn't.
Well,
use it.
I just think the state what happens is they put this out for bid, and Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and some of the larger banks bid on our project. So what we do is we put in an application, let's say we want to purchase 40 cars. They will put together the packet, send it out in a bid packet, and then banks bid on our lending. And it's just termed a lease, but it's actually a financing arrangement is all it is.
Okay, so basically then what you are saying is that you can run the numbers and see which way comes out better for DDSN. Am I correct?
It's a resource.
Better as compared to what? Because it's just principal and interest. It's no different than a traditional loan. It's kind of like equipment leasing or equipment financing. If you've ever done that before, they typically call it a lease, not a bank loan.
Okay.
Let me
So what
clarify.
would be your recommendation? And what would be your recommendation and why?
Well, at this point, we're not really, what I'm trying to do is get the juices flowing and see, maybe in the August meeting or September meeting, we can actually
Come with a recommendation.
present something.
Okay.
Right now, I'm greasing the skids and just hoping that, when we get back together, it's not going to be the very first time you've heard it and you've had time to think about it.
We can see, is there any more information available to send out? But I think that
Sent him.
Robinson wants to say something.
Right, she does.
The interest rate on that was 0.9%, is that correct?
Right, it's less than 1%. 0.87 is what their last, and they said that was what we could expect, about 0.87% right now in this market, which is free money. I mean, you can get that on your checking account.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite.
Representative Lowe is a good friend of mine. He's on Ways and Means. And then Senator Leatherman is also a good friend of mine. I'm going to give both of them a call and just run it by them and have a conversation to where what they have, their opinions on this. So that'll kind of give me an idea.
I think what we were bringing it to y'all as a resource. Otherwise, we're going to have to fund it ourselves out of our bank account, and then this would be something we could pay back over time at a very, very low, very, very low interest rate. One way or the other, this stuff's got to be purchased. So we were looking at it as a resource for the agency that had never been used before.
Well, you know, the decision tree is, you know, and this is kind of where I am as a practicing CPA, advising my clients in the past is don't want to use your operational dollars for long-term financing because that's how you back yourself in a corner. You just can't go spending all your operating dollars buying assets that last 5, 10, 15 years. That's a good way to get yourself in trouble and not have enough money left in the bank. It's kind of like saying, well, let me.
You see Time Warner Cable?
What's that? I have not.
Ed?
We didn't hear you, Ed.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So,
I don't think he was.
you know, so it's kind of similar to, let's say you had a savings account with $50,000 in it, and you decide to go buy your $50,000 car with your savings account. Now you have no liquidity when something happens. It's the same thing. It's just we're dealing with millions of dollars. So, but anyways, it's just presented as information,
Okay.
Ms. Chair.
All right. Thank you for that. And maybe we'll get some ideas flowing and generated through this discussion
Okay.
on other options. All right, so the next item is the State Master Lease Program.
Yeah, that was
Sorry, directives refer to the committee 103-01 DD Federal Grant Application and Change Policies, the first one.
Yeah, these items are just on here to let the committee know that the policy committee is going to be referring these to you.
Okay.
And so they meet, I guess, next week. We just need to be positioned to take these up and consider revisions. So is it just strictly letting you know what's coming?
Right.
And staff will review these and make recommendations, you know, and then we'll have to get public comment as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going over that at our next meeting, and we're going to consider more than likely do that. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next item then. The band B and band I project update from Chris.
Yeah, just want to keep this on the agenda every month until we get it implemented. We really haven't made a whole lot of progress since the last meeting. Our entire team has been covered up with year-end conversion and this national code transition. Is that pretty much what's hampered you guys then? Yeah. So, you know, our team's been, you know, but y'all got that done now, right? For the most part?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still working on some issues, but mostly.
But IT is mostly done with it, so we can start getting.
I mean, it took 60% of our team offline to work on that pretty much. So we had to hit the pause button, but I think we're meeting again next week to get this rolling again. And so we'll have some more substantive things to report at the next meeting, or maybe even by the commission meeting.
Let me ask something about that, if I can, about the band Bs and band Is. At the last meeting of the finance committee, Chris, you mentioned something called internal bands, and I'm trying to figure out, once we do these band, as far as I understood it, once we do these band Bs and band Is, then the only thing that is not a fee for service. And by the way, I think that our minute, I meant to say this in the minutes, I'm sorry, I didn't want me to approve in the minutes, but in saying that the band Bs and band Is will flip, I think it should say the band Bs and band Is will be fee for service.
Yeah.
That'd be much more clear in our minutes, by the way. And I'm sorry I approved the minutes. I knew there was something about them that I was trying to think of, but I couldn't find my notes sitting here trying to do this. But more importantly,
Says that, actually.
I thought it said flip.
You always say flip to fee for service.
Well, it just says the last line, DDSN has a cross-functional team that is engaged in meeting routinely on the variety of aspects impacted by the change to fee for service for bands I and bands B and band I, which basically is saying the same thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Generally, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I didn't look at it close enough, but anyway, it just didn't sound right to say flip to me. But anyway, that's not the issue. The issue is, what I wanted to ask was, at the last meeting, you mentioned something called an interior band, and I've never, I'm not an expert on this stuff at all, and I'm sorry that I'm not more of an expert on bands than I am, although if you read the Mercer report, you'd understand you need to be an expert to understand it. But what I'm saying is, what is an interior band, and is there any, more importantly, is there any band outside of a residential program that will not be fee for service as of October 1st?
I don't know what the interior internal band is. I'd have to go back and listen to the video. You're talking about the finance committee meeting?
That's right.
Let me review that and see what I said, because I have no clue.
I have no idea what that is.
But to answer the second part of your question, yes, only residential bands will be left, nothing else. If they don't have a residential component, it'll be fee for service. Can y'all think of anything right? Yeah, if it's not residentially associated, then it'll be fee for service.
If it's not considered a direct residential band, it is fee for service. Is that correct?
It will be.
Okay, it will be as of October 1st, I mean.
Correct.
Okay, well, then sometimes my ears are not right, and sometimes I'm trying to make notes and I try to make two notes at the same time, and so I may have messed up. But it seems like you said something about an interior band, and I didn't understand what that was.
I don't know, were you thinking of the Band A's that are the state-funded community supports?
Those are already.
They're already fee for service.
We have one that.
No, it didn't give a letter. He just said they were interior bands. He didn't give a letter. He didn't say, and that's another thing about bands, this craziest thing to me. An A doesn't, it don't even stand for anything. So you don't know what an A is or a C is or a D is or any other, unless you're completely into the system. But anyway, the point is, he didn't give a letter. He just said there was an interior, there are still some interior bands that
I think what you're talking about potentially, Barry, is we have some bands that we use in the house that aren't public outside per se, because we have to use them, like band W1 or something, and we have a Z that's residential Husky. We've got some odd bands that we use in-house to help separate populations.
You may have said interior or in-house. It could have been either one of those. Go ahead, sorry.
So that's the only thing I can think of, but.
What is that?
Excuse me?
What is that?
What is what? W1?
What?
We have so many populations and weird funding streams that we have to do with the QPLs and a lot of the different high management, medical model. There's all these different residential services, and it may not be a band publicly to a provider outside this agency, but internally we have to have band assignments to run our reports and associate funding with them.
So, Chris,
So you're basically creating a band so you can put it down on the sheet? It's a band that nobody else uses but you in the finance department? Is that what you're saying?
I'm gonna let Lori.
Maybe a way to explain it is all of the residential bands, it's a way to categorize people in residential bands. Right? It's an internal categorization of people who are in a residential band.
And it's not fee for service.
No, and they won't be fee for service. So the
That's what he's trying to get at. Like,
B and I's are the ones that we're looking at going to fee for service. And once the B's and I's go, there are no more people at home in a band. Everybody else in a band lives in a residential program of some sort.
Yes, and at some point, our plan as a commission is to have everything to be fee for service. So at some point, all of it will be. But I realize not in October. But at least I think that's the intent of the commission. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure there was no other band that was not going to be fee for service that was not a residential band. That's the only thing I'm trying to make sure of.
yeah, Okay, well, I think Barry, I think your confusion was cleared up, right, Barry? It's
I think so,
internal.
yeah, I think so.
Internal, in-house bands is what you were referring to in the beginning.
I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds.
There's no hidden bands, I guarantee you that.
Those are gonna discontinue, is that what would happen? Once we went to fee for service, they would discontinue?
Yeah, well, yeah, once they go fee for service, we'll have to use another mechanism to associate funding levels. For example, if we go fee for service and we have 9 residential payment rates, somehow we have to label those rates and associate a name with, okay, you're in level 4. Maybe it's a numbered system.
High, low.
You know, high, low, medium, high. I mean, it'll be some labeling that'll have to be done, but it won't be a band.
Well, to prevent confusion at that point, and I hope I see the day on the commission in my years that happens, but to prevent confusion, I suggest we stop using the word band at that point for anything.
Okay.
Outlaw it. No.
Even rubber bands?
Yes.
As little as possible. You call them rubber paper clips.
That's a good one.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
So we'll
moving
move
on, sorry.
Okay. Our next item is the Chief Financial Officer report. Chris.
Okay, I only have 2 items. First, I'd like to let the committee know that we did send out a memo earlier this week relating to the 305DD directive change for state facilities that you all passed last month. So far, we've not received, too much blowback on it. I think some providers were not aware that had happened or was happening, so they're a little shocked to find that it occurred. But once we clarify that, we're working through a few little issues here and there and some glitches, but overall, I think it's going really smoothly. So I just wanted to let you know that transpired and that we're trying to work through any concerns that providers vocalize to us in the meantime. Okay?
Okay.
The only other thing is I know I've spoken in the past about some of our concerns with our cost reports, and as I've told our providers in our statewide meetings, I can't blame the providers for the quality of what they're turning in when we don't train them and provide them any type of resources to complete the reports. So the reports that we're getting that are not what we need, it's our fault as far as I'm concerned that is occurring. And so my team, Debbie's back here, we're working on developing several things. We're working on a cost report training, which that was the reason I was a little late getting in here. Got that invitation sent out. We're looking at doing a socially distanced training. We're hoping to rent a facility somewhere around here. We're thinking we might have up to 30 folks come, and it's going to be a hands-on, bring your laptop. Let's get in the weeds and work on these cost reports type of session. Looking at the end of August for that. We're also trying to develop a guide to help folks have a user manual per se to go from. And then, of course, we need to really revisit what we're asking them to turn in. And I think, in my opinion, part of the reason we're getting what we're getting that's not adequate is the format of what we're asking for the information is not adequate. So I didn't want to change the cost report forms this year. We threw a lot of changes at the auditors already for this year. And so I've kicked that to next year to hopefully revisit the cost report format, which I hope will improve our quality and also streamline. It'll be easier for the providers to submit their information. And then when it gets to Debbie's area, for us to aggregate it, because we have to take all that data right now and enter it. We have to key it from paper into an Excel spreadsheet, which is crazy. If we receive it in Excel, we can just combine stuff without keying things. So that's what we're looking at. And then our quality assurance checklist, we're working on that as well. So I just want to let y'all know, that we're trying to address those weaknesses.
Okay. Sounds good plan based on what you just outlined.
Chris, is there any information on our, or Pat, more likely, I guess, is there any information on our, any update on our, liabilities for cost reports and the millions that could cost us? Is there any information on, do we have any idea what that's gonna cost yet? Which is a whole nother reason to talk about what we were talking about earlier, but I know we have millions in potential liabilities in that regard, and I just wondered if there was any update.
Not until the cost reports get done. I don't have any update.
We just met with the CPA firm. Was it this week? My weeks are blending. We just met with the CPA firm in Maryland. They've been going through some closures due to COVID and had some disruption at their level, and they lost Heather, which was a key person on the cost report team, left the firm. So we met with them. They are making a ton of progress on 13 through 15. They have told HHS that they will have 13s done by the end of August, which that's a very lofty goal, but they've made a bunch of progress. They've been working on it over the last, whatever number of months. Now, the 2017 cost report is on me right now, and I need to get to it. Pat keeps telling me, whatever you do, you got to get that done. I'm trying to get to it. It's 99.9% done. My biggest issue is with the Haskell waiver cost report. We're looking at about $1 million settlement right now, which is not accurate at all. The reason we have that settlement is because the Haskell waiver costs were not properly reported by providers, back to us not educating our providers on what to report. So we had I think it was about 15 providers that had Haskell waiver residential contracts, and only about 6 reported any residential cost, which is what was given to the CPA firm to do the cost report. So I've got to go grab all those costs for those other residential programs and aggregate them and get them back to the CPA firm.
Barry, the only thing I'd add is, even though 17 is almost done, and I think it'll be a nominal payback, if anything. I think, Chris.
I don't think
anything. And our risk for 18 and 19 and 20, I believe, are very, very low because we have so much excess cost in the system. Our risk for paybacks are 13, 14, and 15. I think I have no guesstimate as to what they would be. So, and they're going to be the next ones done. So when those 3 are done, I think we'll have pretty much certainty as to what our exposure is.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not interested in conjecture. You don't need to tell me about what you think or anything like that. I'm just getting it out there that's something else we have to deal with, and was just concerned about it. But go ahead.
That's it.
All right. The last item, anybody have any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the last item. Director of Internal Audit Report, Kevin.
I'm like Chris, I just have a couple of things just for information only.
Can y'all hear him?
No, we can't. I can't. Sorry.
So just 2 pieces of information. Our internal audit committee charter was last reviewed in 2017. So I'm working on that right now, and hopefully we'll get that to y'all in the next week or so that you can review it.
What is that exactly? When you say a charter?
It basically lays out, the internal audit committee charter lays out audit committee responsibilities, what y'all should be looking at, like internal controls, risk management, that subcategories.
Okay.
Each of those. Okay. We try to review it systemically. In the past, it's sort of been every 3 years, so this falls into the 3-year mark. And then we have, so there's the internal audit committee charter, and then there is the internal audit charter, which in our case is in the form of a directive 27505, which is just general duties of internal audit.
Okay.
And trying to look at that as well. Okay. So we will get that to y'all hopefully in the next week or 2, those revisions or any updates that we might have, so we can discuss it next month. Hopefully get a vote on it so it can be presented to the commission.
All right. Any questions from anyone on the call? All right, well, that concludes our committee meeting, and if no one has anything else, then we'll stand adjourned at 4:01.
I so move we adjourn.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. All
Very
in
good,
favor?
Robin. We got done in an hour. That's the first hour meeting you've had in a long time.
I didn't have any control. I wish I could.
Well, actually, most of it was information.
Right.